Hey, hey, we're live. What is up, everybody? We're back after a bit of a hiatus. Good to be back. We've got some good stuff coming up today. We're going to be talking with Ask Yourself later on at 9 o'clock. And before then, we're also going to be giving a guest lecture at Johns Hopkins. So you can see what I have to say there. I'm about to start my second pot of coffee of the day because it's 7:30 for me, and I've been grinding all day. So I'm having a little pick me up now. All right. Let's start out. We've got the lecture at 8 o'clock, and I'll be joining that live and doing that lecture while live streaming it. So you guys are getting a Johns Hopkins University level education today, at least for an hour. You can call it that. But we've got some time before then, so let's do a little bit of Fast Action Network. Who are we going after at the moment? Food Lion, official groups of the Atlantic Coast Conference, non-position. However, nearly okay. Food Lion is, yeah, that's right. We've done some stuff to Food Lion already, haven't we? Well, let's. Huh. It says their content wasn't available. Let me find it, I guess. Food Lion. Maybe just comment on whatever they've got recently. Maybe they deleted the post that they had linked to. So let's just comment on a few of these. Send an email to Comfort Inn and Sweet Spurs, Puerto Rico. This is going to bring up my Outlook. You know, very sad. I've actually lost my streak on here. I'm really gutted about that one. I went a couple of weeks, I guess, without doing Fast Action Network. I think I was up to like a 14-week streak, but all for nothing. Well, not all for nothing, I guess, but just the end. That's a really bad attitude. Just the end of the streak, not all for nothing. Though we did learn that time. Look at that, we're back to 1 week streak. Email Stop and Shop executives about Boston Globe ad. We're just getting going on the second coffee pot of the day. I just did this, right? I think I might have sent that twice, but that's okay. Oh no, I guess it's emailing a bunch of different people, that's all right. Send, done. Send email to Radisson EMEA communication team. Since Radisson Hotel Group made its cage free commitment in 2019, they've shown very little progress. Well, they removed their 2025 deadline and are only reporting on the hotels using cage-free eggs instead of total egg volumes. Well, that is very sneaky. That's kind of a shame. I've stayed at Radisson before, but I won't be doing that again. Not until they fix this. It's so crafty when companies just take down their target. They've set it, their stakeholders have wanted them to do this, they've said they're going to do it, and then they just don't and hope everyone forgets. Good that there's people out here holding them accountable. Hey, look at that, someone else doing Fast Action Network. Good for them. Another email to Radisson Global Communication Team. I get emails back from some of these sometimes. A couple of the Subway franchisees emailed me what seemed to be like thought through replies, which is cool. I mean, obviously the goal of this is to get these people's attention and get them to do something about it. Yeah, look at this. Another few people commenting about Cage Free. We'll give them a like. We're on action.humaneleague.org, .thehumaneleague.org. I'll put that link in the chat if anybody wants to join me. We'll be speaking later to a class at Johns Hopkins, and then later at 9 o'clock we'll be speaking to Ask Yourself. Oh, we already did a few Food Lion posts. I'll scroll down a bit and do some more. Yeah, I think I messaged Ask Yourself saying let's go through my most recent Vegan 2.0 video. I just want to get his take on some of my thoughts there. Wow, there's loads on here. I haven't done this for a little while, so there's a lot backed up for me to do. Let's see if we can complete this again today, lads. A few of these. We've got some stuff to read later and some videos to watch, but honestly, I don't know how much time we're going to have for it. We'll see, we'll see, we'll see, we'll see. Here we go. Oh, this is a recommend. Sorry, distracted. Surely this is the same thing. There's so many variations of the page. It's like comments on their posts and their reviews, and I guess it's been determined that Facebook is a big avenue for these guys. Comment on their LinkedIn also. Welcome guys, thanks for joining. We're doing a bit of Fast Action Network. To kick off, we're going to be talking to a class at Johns Hopkins at 8 o'clock. And we're going to be talking to Ask Yourself later on at 9. Right now we're at action.thehumaneleague.org and we are letting Radisson Hotel Group right now know that we're not happy with them having backtracked on their cage-free commitment. I'm very upset because I lost my my week streak on the Humane League Fast Action Network. I was up to maybe 13 weeks. Maybe that was what it was. Unlucky 13 weeks. But hey, that's what we've got to beat. That's a whole quarter, I guess. It's very nerdy thing I just said, but Comfort in Monterey Valley. This is the same thing. Choice Hotels, I guess, is the other chain here. Oh, and these are all like branches of that, basically. Okay. Nice spaced. I always like when I see other people. Oh, whoops. It's my little AI friends that I can have on Facebook if I want to, I guess. Or whatever those little icons are called. Ah. Let's read a bit of. In fact, no, let's not do that. Look, I'm going to 8 o'clock. I'm going to be talking a lot, so let's watch. Let's watch Paul Bashir for a little bit.
My name is Paul Bashir. I am the co-founder and director of Anonymous for the Voiceless. I only have 30 minutes with you today, so I'm going to give you a very express and summarized version of the training and the ethos of AV. And I'm going to talk about some things that should help you to feel more confident with speaking with non-vegans. So, first of all, AV is predicated on a basic idea that people who are not vegan should be slapped in the face with the reality of what they're responsible for. We stand on streets all around the world. We've done this in 1,011 cities officially. And we show people the truth of what happens when animals are exploited, mainly for their flesh or from whatever comes from their bodies for human use. And then based on the context of showing people that reality, which I think people deserve to see and should see, we have...
Hey Humphrey, good to see you. How are you doing this evening?
...an engagement with them through an outreach interaction. And through that interaction, the point of that interaction is not to simply educate them. This is a misunderstanding that some people have about the work we do. Education and information is important, but it's only a small part of what we're trying to achieve. The goal is to get them to go vegan. And not only to become vegan, but to speak out against this injustice, to become an animal rights activist. And not only that, but to become the best animal rights activist in the world.
That's Vegan 2.0, unironically. Based Paul.
Now, if that's the level that we're aiming for, then the way that we do this needs to be taken into consideration. We need to understand that to be most effective at achieving that goal, it's not just about giving people information, because information is already out there. We live in the age of information. People already have access to this information. We have lots of information out there already. But why aren't people vegan en masse? Because they choose to look away, they choose to ignore, and they choose to be complacent. And we live in a society where that is comforted, isn't it? Everybody in society is going to make you feel A-okay with being non-vegan. In fact, vegans are mocked. The idea of being vegan is mocked and ridiculed. So we live in a society where you don't really have a motive in society to be vegan. So the information
Nice, joining us from Canada, Humphrey. I always like to know where people are from. Bit of a smattering in my audience.
is already out there. What's keeping people from being vegan? Well, we don't live in a society where you're held accountable for not being vegan, right? That's what's missing, not the information. And if you're not holding non-vegans accountable, I hope that this talk will help you to understand the moral imperative that you have as a vegan to do that with non-vegans. And that's the other thing. For those of you who are not active, what are you doing? We need you to be active because the animals are only relying upon vegans. They have no one else.
Been thinking a bit about that idea of accountability. I think it is a really, I think it is a key thing the more I've thought about it. There's a lot in everybody's life that they could do better if someone were to hold them accountable for it. I've thought about myself in all sorts of things, all sorts of areas of my life. When you have a trainer at the gym, a big part of that is accountability. Just the feeling that someone's going to call you out if you don't do the thing that you're supposed to do. And it's absolutely right that, you know, society is kind of organized in such a way that that doesn't happen, especially with respect to veganism. It's just, I mean, it's impolite, isn't it? It's socially uncomfortable to actually do that. And that's why most times people won't. Of course, if you're doing it in the context of street activism, I think that kind of removes those social norms. You're normally interacting with strangers, I guess. So you don't have to kind of violate a social situation that you're in, or the norms of a social situation that you're in. But yeah, accountability, I'm very sympathetic to this whole framing.
It's a great thing that you no longer participate in what the rest of society participates in. But from there on, if you understand the purpose of veganism, then you need to be active. I cannot stress that enough. Now, in order to understand why I'm making such a strong point about this, I need to go all the way back to the definition of veganism. Please raise your hand if you know who Leslie Cross is. Wow, hardly any of you. Here in this country in 1951, he coined the term. The term simply means to be a human being who rejects animal exploitation. That's it.
You know, I've always heard this specifically attributed to another guy named Donald Watson. Is this some sort of law split? What's the name that he said? Leslie Cross. Maybe they're in the same sort of gang. And it was around the same time. Any thoughts on that? Donald Watson, Leslie Cross. Is that what's the law there, I wonder?
So when you ask most people, what does vegan mean for you? They'll say, it means you don't eat meat, and you don't eat dairy, and you don't eat eggs, and things like that. They think it's about what you don't consume.
Yeah, true, Lambretta. Far fewer people would be involved in eating it if they had to kill the animal themselves. And geez, we shared a little while ago that Earthling Ed documentary about slaughterhouse workers, which is kind of grim. I mean, obviously, it's no one's first choice of a job. So I always think when you see not Hench Herb, what's the guy? Plant Geezer, where he goes to the farms and the slaughterhouses and so on, the staff always look so like dead behind the eyes, you know.
They think it's a diet, and a restrictive one at that. And so we are in a serious problem as a movement if that's what the global consensus is on what this word means. And this problem is not just with non-vegans. This problem exists within the vegan movement. Most of you, like I said, didn't even know who Leslie Cross was. Now, the term was changed by Vegan Society, and I'm not going to get into why, because I don't really know the full story. But the term was changed, and I'm assuming that it was in an effort to clarify the term further. But I think that the term is already clear. I think that the way that it was defined is already crystal clear. Now, if you take a stance as a human being to reject animal exploitation, and you don't speak out against this injustice, and you're not active for the animals, you don't understand the definition of the word. Because if you reject any other injustice, would you just stop doing it yourself? Or would you speak out against it when everybody in society around you is doing it 3 times a day or more?
That's kind of interesting. In Paul's definition of veganism seems to entail some degree of activism. He's saying you would have to do more than just stop doing it yourself. You have to speak out against it. And he's mentioned effectiveness a lot. I'm wondering if this definition is similar to Vegan 2.0 in terms of putting the baseline at effective activism. That's pretty cool. I've never noticed that before in any of the anonymous stuff that we've watched.
You would speak out against it, wouldn't you? Right? Let me hear your voices. You would, wouldn't you? So why would you compromise when it comes to non-human animals who are the most victimized in society, the most oppressed? They have been oppressed longer than any group of beings, and they are oppressed by the trillion every year by only 8 billion humans. This is the largest injustice by far. There is no greater injustice than this. People love to say, why don't you speak about human rights? This isn't relevant. Really? The opposite is true. There is nothing more relevant than this. The animals have been oppressed to such a degree that they're not even considered victims at all. And who is going to change that in society? The only ones that the animals can rely on are vegans to defend them. So I hope I've made my point clear about why you should be active for the animals. And within the organization that I run, you are more than welcome to join us as long as you understand that what we are doing is taking a stance against animal exploitation in society and that we take that job seriously. If you don't have a local chapter near you, you can become an organizer and you can operate Cubes of Truth. Raise your hand if you know what a Cube of Truth is. Fantastic. Cubes of Truth are extremely effective at getting people to change. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about exactly what our flow is. That's what you see behind me. This is the flowchart that we recommend you use when you speak to non-vegans. But before I get into that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the ethos that we have at AV. I'll talk to you about the definition of the word, because that is extremely important for you to understand first and foremost, because it will dictate how you operate, how you communicate as an activist. And now I want to talk to you about the approach that we have with our outreach principles and why we have them. This approach that we have is pure honesty. I come from a sales background and I understand how to say things in a sweet way to convince people to sign on the dotted line.
Who knew that? He's a salesman by background. That's super interesting. I did not know that.
But this is not that. This is addressing an injustice. See, I had a big ego and I thought...
Is it not that? It is that on some level, right?
thought I could bring those things into doing animal rights activism, but it doesn't apply. Because, again, this is about holding people accountable, and that's a different ballgame completely. So there are no political games and sales games that you can play that will get people to change. And to make my point clearer, it doesn't matter how perfect you say everything that you need to say if you say it to the wrong person. People are either willing to change or they are not. And to make that point even clearer, Earthling Ed's parents are not vegan. Gary Yourofsky's mother is not vegan. My parents are not vegan. My family members are not vegan. They have heard me speak about this injustice ad nauseum. I have done outreach to them for years, and they still have not changed. I've done outreach interactions on the streets with people who seemed like they would change, and I said everything perfectly, and they still didn't change. So this is a numbers game. The more people that you speak to, the higher the probability will be that you will speak to people who will change. And that is part of your job as an activist.
No, I haven't heard that, Humphrey. Maybe I'll ask him about that. But that's in like an hour we've got, Isaac, in an hour and 5 minutes. I'm going to be speaking to this JHU class before that, but I'm just realizing that the Zoom link they've given me is not letting me in, so we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Yeah, he's talking about this thing again about some people are ready to change and some people are not. We've spoken about the stages of change model, where you'll have people at the pre-contemplation or contemplation or preparation stages before changing. But I don't know, it seems to be something more than that even, because he's talking about having spoken to people for years. Oh, here we go. We got the Zoom password for this class.
To assess who you're speaking to, whether they're reachable or not, and understanding that you will not reach people who are not reachable. This should help you to not waste your energy on people who are not reachable, because you will end up just banging your head up against the wall with those kinds of people, and you will drain yourself as an activist. And I've seen burnout in this movement so much that I have to stress this point to all of you, because it's helped me in my activism and countless other activists who listen to what I have to say. So please don't waste time with people who are not reachable, and focus your energy.
Yeah, I like that, but not a lot to do.
Okay, we're going on, we're on Zoom.
Sorry,
We're on
Dr. Brian,
Zoom.
we can't hear you. I think it might be on our side, though.
Let me change this quick.
Oh, I
Hey
can hear
guys,
you.
how are you doing?
So it's kind of like a streamer setup.
Yeah.
I legit thought that we accidentally opened up a stream. Oh my god. Yeah, bright the blue screen so that you can like overlay.
Okay, this is not, why is it not sharing the screen
Sorry, one
properly?
more time, Dr. Brian.
Oh, whoops, docs.
I think it's going good.
Timeline is Tuesday.
You guys are not getting a proper view of the stream, are you? Of the screen share.
Information.
Yeah, we can finish, we have time to finish the presentation until Thursday, so.
Yeah.
We're very fine.
Okay.
I was, it's just like, I was wanting to send, so, you know, what they're,
I feel like this
Might also not-
Yeah.
We barely got interviews done over the weekend.
I don't know how, I think that it's like, not that deep, like, I said it was fun, we might. So I think we don't.
You know what, I'm just gonna share
It's not
this,
bad. I said that we might, Thunder, you know,
you can hear the class right now. I'm just gonna share the slides that I'm gonna
You
do.
know what I mean? So like, people.
Yeah, we just gotta like,
And I think
try to
we're.
look into our ideas and then. How is it presenting on your end?
It's going, I actually have to update the slides and record. I'm probably gonna have to record Wednesday.
Okay. Same template that you sent via the.
Yeah, just update that. If you don't, I mean, if, I don't know if,
Kill that sound for now. Oy, oy, oy. Okay. Which screen am I going to show you guys? This one. Alright, let's do it like that. Hello, Ryan and class. How are we? Can you guys hear me? Test, test. How are you? Can you hear me, guys, in JHU?
could you change the name from Feature Cal 1 to just like Feature
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah.
Cause I tried to do that.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely call it different.
And then
Test, test. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, loud and clear.
Ah, nice.
Thanks for being here, Dr. Bryant. I'll just give a quick intro to the class, and then to you, and then I'll.
See, this is what I thought. She just wants me to.
Typically, the speakers go for about an hour.
Cut off.
So that'll be perfect. So to finish up by 3:50, 3:55, take some questions, and we hopefully get some questions throughout too. Okay? Chris, have you done this before?
Awesome, that sounds good. Yes, I spoke to this class last year or maybe 2 years ago. So yes, I'm looking forward to speaking to you guys again.
Great, thank you.
Comfort materials.
No, I practiced today.
Oh,
Hey guys, welcome to class today. Quick couple of announcements before we get started.
Intro and
You
then
guys
I'll
have
be
your midterm presentation on Thursday. If you have any questions about that, feel free to chat with me or Alexa. Also remember to turn in your discussion post due Sunday. And we'll be sending around an attendance sheet shortly, so you guys can sign in. I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Chris Bryant, the Executive Director of Bryant Research. Dr. Bryant is a social scientist and an expert in the field of all proteins, with a PhD in psychology from the University of Bath and an MSc in policy research from the University of Bristol. He brings a unique perspective to the challenges of our food systems.
Didn't mention how much you
For his
YouTube.
team at Bryant Research, Dr. Bryant collaborates with altruistic companies and animal protection nonprofits to accelerate the transition towards more sustainable and ethical food sources. As we'll hear today, his work dives into the social aspect of this transition, examining consumer behavior, policy implications, and the broader impacts of reducing animal product consumption. Dr. Bryant, thanks so much for being here, and feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Hey, well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak to the class. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll be talking about social science for alternative proteins. So what we do at Bryant Research is a mix of things, including public opinion surveys and polling. We do focus groups. We do sort of expert interview based projects, and as well as white papers and policy research and that kind of thing. All of our clients are in animal protection and or alternative proteins, so we work with a lot of animal non-profits, as well as cultivated meat, plant-based meat, and fermentation-derived animal product alternative companies. And yeah, like I said, our work spans the social sciences. So for those of you who are on this alternative proteins course but are not in sort of STEM subjects or biochemistry or chemical engineering or any of those sort of product-facing roles, this will be an interesting talk for you. So there's 4 parts of this that I'll talk about. I don't think, well, I'll probably take, maybe half an hour or the best part of an hour, and I'll leave lots of time for questions if you guys have them. I should mention as well, I am currently live streaming this to all of 9 viewers on my YouTube channel also. I started putting videos on YouTube earlier this year to try and get this kind of research just to have a bit more of a broad and sort of mainstream reach. So if you search on YouTube for Chris Bryant PhD, you will find the stream of this. So there you go. So yeah, 4 parts. First of all is consumer research, which I'll talk about. That's going to be mainly based on surveys. Then policy levers, where again we'll look at a bit of survey data on what kind of policies are popular and unpopular, as well as just some reasoning about how different policies work to nudge things in the direction of alternative proteins and away from animal products. Then third, we'll talk a little bit about intellectual property, patents, and how that plays into the world of alternative proteins. And finally, a few words on farming jobs. And as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that my slides there are most likely a little bit out of date, so we can have a little bit of discussion on that part off piece, most likely. So consumer research first of all, and yeah, like I said, I'll leave a bunch of time for questions at the end. Okay, so consumer research first of all. This is a survey from the UK, which I conducted about 5 years ago, asking people what they thought of veganism. And you can see positive opinions represented in green bars here, neutral represented in yellow, and negative opinions represented in red bars. And if you see the areas where us vegans, tend to talk about the benefits the most to the environment in terms of ethics and morality and to human health, these are all areas where largely people already agree and have a positive opinion of veganism. I should say, by the way, this is a survey of 1,000 meat eaters in the UK, so we've specifically left out vegetarians and vegans from this. So it's asking meat eaters what they think about veganism. And most of them, over 50%, had a positive opinion in terms of the environmental, ethical, and health impacts. Where we see the more negative opinions, though, the majority of people having negative opinions of veganism in these red-dominated rows, are with respect to being easy, convenient, enjoyable and tasty, and affordable. So this is very much a picture of agreement in principle and then barriers and problems in practice. Again, most people have a positive view and are basically in agreement that veganism is positive with respect to the main benefits that we talk about. And then the pragmatic, practical barriers is where there's more negative views. Nevertheless, we're seeing these barriers start to come down a little bit, and this is the major role of alternative proteins, where we've seen acceptance, or rather perceived quality of these products going up very rapidly in a recent period. So this is data from Belgium, and shows 44% of people here in blue finding plant-based meat alternatives to be acceptable. Or I guess this was, yeah, to what extent did it meet their needs, right? Fully or somewhat met their needs in 2019. And that number jumping to 51% in 2020. So quite a large jump in just 1 year. And this was really a period of these products improving and proliferating a lot. So we saw, you know, quite rapid progression in consumer perceptions during that time. One question that sometimes people ask, because I work with both cultivated meat and plant-based meat, and some people often ask something like, kind of, what's the point of one given the other, basically, right? As you know, they're kind of playing for the same market, aren't they? Here we can see crossed over consumer data according to whether they would eat cultivated meat and whether they are satisfied with plant-based meat. So you can see, first of all, we've got this 22% here in the bottom right who are both enthusiastic about plant-based and cultivated meat, right? So, you know, good for them, they're on board with both. But more interestingly, we've got these cells which add up to about 40% of consumers who basically have a positive attitude towards the one but not necessarily the other. So either they do like plant-based meat but not so keen on cultivated meat, that's about 25%, or they're not so keen on plant-based meat but they do like cultivated meat, and that's around 18%. And the ways in which consumers think about these kind of sets of products differ as well, where plant-based products are seen as being more appealing to vegetarians and flexitarian, you know, inclined consumers, and somewhat more appealing to females, and concerns being mainly about taste. Cultivated meats, on the other hand, shows actually, interestingly, a lot of these reversed, so tending to get more interest from meat eaters compared to vegetarians, and from men compared to women as well. And there are different sets of concerns, mainly centered around naturalness, and keen to see that these products are regulated effectively so that they can be guaranteed to be safe. So kind of diverging sets of consumer concerns for these different types of alt proteins. This is demonstrating a higher market share for plant-based products when they are at a lower price. So what we did here was had an experiment where people could choose between either buying plant-based patties, buying beef patties, or buying neither. The price of the beef patties is held steady at £3.50, and then the price of the plant-based patties is varied depending on their experimental condition. And you can see a higher proportion of people, up to 2/3, choosing the plant-based patties when they're at a significant discount compared to the beef patties, right? So that would have been £2.50 versus £3.50. You get 2/3 choosing the cheaper plant-based ones, right down to only 20% choosing them when they're significantly more expensive than the beef patties. And when they get more expensive, you see this effect that some people are dropping out of the market altogether, right? These are people who would be up for cheap plant-based patties, but when they get expensive, they don't switch to beef, they just drop out of the market. But importantly, they are also taking share from the beef patties, right? So at the expensive plant-based condition, we get 56% going for the beef patties, and that drops right down to 23% when the plant-based patties are nice and cheap. So getting the price down for these products is going to be really key. And that's, I would say, the big cause for optimism at the moment for the plant-based meat market is that the worldwide inflation, particularly in food, that has caused significant headwinds in the short term and been a real challenge for a lot of plant-based companies, has actually impacted animal products much more severely than it's impacted plant-based products. And you're increasingly now seeing different categories of plant-based foods where the plant-based one is for the first time cheaper than the animal product. This has not been the case historically, right? Vegan burgers are typically much more expensive than beef burgers, for example. And just now you're starting to see that coming more into alignment and starting to favor plant-based products. So messaging strategies, I think this is the last section on the consumer research bit. There's really two main lessons that I'll sort of focus on here. One is avoiding very prominent vegan sections and, very prominent vegan labels, as well as segregated vegan sections. So that goes for menus and also sort of sections of a supermarket. Here's survey data showing vegan right at the bottom of a list of what makes foods more appealing, from terms to do with fresh, farm fresh at the top of this list, and then at the bottom of this list, gluten-free, diet, and then vegan. So it's well advised to use other terms instead. 100% plant-based is often used on these products so that they don't have vegan in the title. Here's a cool experiment where they have the vegetarian options either segregated in their own little vegetarian section, like you can see here on the right-hand menu, or mixed in with all of the other options and just indicated with a bit more of a subtle V logo, like you can see here on the left. And perhaps you can guess the punchline here. When you mix them in like that, as opposed to having them in their own segregated section, the choice of the vegetarian options more than doubles. So sectioning them off in their own little vegetarian bit, we get half the choice compared to mixing them in with the other options. The second lesson that I'll say on messaging strategies is to prefer taste-based messages over health-based messages. The main thing here of relevance for the plant-based category is all of this discourse about so-called ultra-processed food, which is, I don't think I have time to go into this here, but very misleading, especially with respect to plant-based alternatives, which tend to have a favorable nutritional profile compared to the meat that they're replacing, even though they're in this category called ultra-processed. And basically this category being kind of conflated and overly broad has led to a lot of confusion on that point. Nevertheless, plant-based products are a little bit wary of defending too hard on the health point, and here's some insights as why. When plant-based products in this experiment had a taste-focused label as opposed to a health-focused label, they were chosen between 2 and 3 times more frequently. And we see this occurring elsewhere. Here's compared to a basic label, you can increase selection by 25% if you have an indulgent label that focuses on the taste. But if you have a label that focuses on health benefits, either healthy restrictive, so that's things like low fat, or healthy positive, which is things like added vitamins, in both cases, you actually get lower selection than just a basic label that doesn't mention health at all. So there seems to be some kind of inference going on where consumers see that or think that's right, healthy, it's low fat, it's low salt, it's low sugar, means not going to be that tasty, right? So health-based messages are to be used with caution. This is the ultimate example of that, where you have a drink which is labeled as either healthy or unhealthy. It's the same drink, and in the experimental condition where it's labeled as healthy, it's rated over about 2 points out of 10 lower enjoyable rating than in the condition where it's labeled unhealthy, right? Simply labeling it as unhealthy made it appear to be some sort of treat, and therefore people rated it as more enjoyable. All right, that's the end of the consumer research section. Like I said, I think that's the longest of the four. Perhaps it's a good idea for me to stop at the end of each section to invite questions if anyone has them. And if not, I will be happy to steam on. But are there any questions in the room?
Yes, we have one question.
We have more than one question. We have one question to start. Chris didn't say, where is Bryant Research located? And are these surveys European in nature, and some of them are maybe a couple of years old, does he think they change? Oh, and you probably know the answer to some of these.
Yes, good question. Yeah, so we're in the UK, and a lot of these are UK surveys. This is US, this is UK. I think these are UK also. So a lot of these will be UK, but we do see generally the patterns, while the numbers might be kind of different, we generally see the patterns as being pretty similar across the UK and US. But yeah, that's a good question.
And has it changed any, have the trends changed any recently, in the last couple of years, or is it pretty stable?
Yes, it has. It has been actually kind of a tough few years for the plant-based sector. I think this has been a mix of ultra-processed discourse and also economic conditions. I think the economic conditions are the most interesting part of it, because there has been, in the UK, and I think similar in the US, has been a couple of years out of the last 4 that have been really rampant inflation, like double digits food inflation. And there's this kind of interesting situation where the plant-based products are more expensive currently. And so in a situation where now your food bill is pressed and there's pressure on you to cut things, it's not surprising that you see some of that getting dropped off the more expensive category. But the rate of inflation change is so much lower. I don't have it in this, but there's a great graph showing beef, chicken, and pork all in like double digits inflation sometime in 2021, and plant-based products like close to 0 or even below. So although they were starting out from a much higher price point, that gap has been shrinking a lot during this inflationary period. And I think there's going to be a real advantage in the long term, because if we get to a point where there's, any kind of animal or environmental pitch aside, you can save 15% on your grocery bill if you switch to plant-based products, right? That's a different pitch entirely.
I have to ask one more, and then I'll turn it over to whoever I've had the question. Why? Why has that been? Why the reversal there?
Yeah, really good question. It basically comes down to agricultural inputs. So essentially, if you're making like a plant-based alternative from soy, and the price of soy goes up, you think, well, that's no good. The price of our main ingredient's gone up. But animals are consuming soy in much larger quantities per calorie produced than plant-based products. So it's much more efficient to use that directly. A big thing that happened obviously in Europe with Russia invading Ukraine, that put a lot of pressure on wheat prices. Again, wheat is like a main ingredient for a lot of these plant-based alternatives. And so you would think, okay, that's bad news, but it's a main ingredient of feed. And so although plant-based products, some of them did get a little bit more expensive in that time, their animal equivalents got like 5 times more expensive in the same time.
Thank you. We have a couple questions from the class now. Go ahead.
I saw a little bit of a silly question, but I saw in the soda question, the average was about a 4 rating. So what soda did you use for it to be rated?
That's right. Yeah. So this was actually, I happen to know the answer to this. So I was looking at this paper today. The drink was a mango lassi.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, I like that one. Yeah, it was a mango lassi, and it was just simply either labeled healthy or unhealthy. I don't know. Maybe people thought the unhealthy version was a cocktail or something. Who knows?
Good question.
Going back to the one study where just generally not using like vegetarian and vegan and using more like plant-based and that sort of thing. Why do you think there's such a bias against like putting this is a vegetarian product or this is a vegan product on yeah, like on products that are vegetarian and vegan? Why is it better to say plant-based or fresh?
Yeah, it's a really good question as well. And I do have some other slides sort of showing this point. I'm realizing I should have amalgamated these a bit better. I think that one of the big things is because it is describing the food, but it is also the name of an identity which you might have or not have. So like gluten-free food being described as celiac food probably would make that even less appealing, right? Because it means the same thing. It just means it doesn't have gluten in it, but it's now called the name of some group that I might think, well, I'm not celiac, so that's not for me, basically. I think that's the main thing that's going on. It's because it's describing the food, but it's also the name of some group, which if I'm not part of that group, then I feel like, well, that's not for me. That's the best I can describe it.
Can you go back to the slide where there was like a difference between female and male consumers? I think it was like earlier on.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think like the gender, like do you think amongst people who are like more favoring vegetarian versus like more favoring like traditional meat, do you think like the gender proportion is a little like, I don't know, uneven, like unequal?
Yes, for sure. When you look at like strict meat avoiders, I think it's about 2/3 or even 3/4 female. In terms of like vegetarians. Here we're talking about like, these gender differences referenced in these slides are only like quite slight, whereby plant-based products are like, what is it? They're slightly more, if you're female, you're slightly more likely to say that you prefer them than if you're male. Whereas the reverse is true for cultivated meat. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon. You might see cultivated meat. This is, meat grown from animal cells being able to capture more of the male high meat attachment market than the plant-based sector has been able to capture. I think that's probably something we'll see in the next few years.
The class. Class.
Any more questions? We'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Ryan.
Awesome. Well, I'll kick on if there are no more questions at this stage.
Yep, I think we're all good.
Good stuff. Okay, cool. So we'll talk a bit about policy levers next. I think this is another longish section, and then the last two are relatively short. So the first section is about meat alternatives there mainly, and consumer research. This is about policies. So what people are voting for, what would people vote for or vote against in terms of policies designed to curtail animal product consumption. Here we've got them ordered from the number of people who support at the top to a high number of people opposing the policy at the bottom. So blue representing support here, yellow representing opposition. And you can see the most popular policy by far is improving on-farm animal welfare standards, which over 90% in this UK sample were in favour of improving on-farm animal welfare standards. We'll talk a bit about how that works, but just to let that sink in, kind of how much more well supported this one is compared to really any of the others, right? The second most well supported is adding animal welfare labels to meat products. So again, it's very sympathetic to animal welfare related things, is really striking how high public support is for animal welfare. Outside of obligation to kind of change one's diet, right? People are very on board with pro-animal measures in general. So those are the most well supported, and then you can see at the bottom of this list we've got the least well supported policies. A 20% tax on meat. This was only approved by 16% of people, with nearly 70% opposing. And then restricting advertisements for meat products is also another measure that, actually, to me, this was kind of surprising how poorly supported that was. I wouldn't have thought that's quite so objectionable, but there we go. Only 27% in favour of that versus 38% opposing. So we can look at some of these policies in a little bit more detail, starting out with taxes and subsidies, just because I think this is where most people kind of default to in terms of policy interventions. It's like the most obvious thing that you can reach for is change the price of the thing that we want people to do more or less of, right, with taxes or subsidies. So as we've seen, animal product taxes are very politically unpopular. If you ask about meat tax or taxes on animal products, people sense and understand this means that my food's going to get more expensive, and they don't want that to happen. So there's been various different framings of a similar thing, imposing a tax versus rescinding tax exemptions or reducing subsidies. So in a lot of places, in Germany, for example, they have a reduced rate of VAT chargeable to meat. So I think the standard VAT is 19%, and then meat is charged at 7% or something like that. And they're looking at, or they may have done it already now actually, rescinding that VAT exemption so that it kind of brings it up to level with other non-meat products. So it's effectively a tax increase, but it's not framed as such. There are also these kind of proxy taxes that might be done on measures which affect meat more so than plant foods. So, for example, a tax on carbon produced by food or on saturated fat, which will tend to disproportionately affect red meat in both cases. And it's notable that in these cases, these could actually backfire on animal welfare. There's something called the small body problem, where basically there is much higher, many more units of animal suffering per kilogram of food when it comes to chicken, fish, and eggs, i.e. products which come from small animals, of which you need very many to produce the same amount of food, compared to red meat and dairy, which come from large-bodied animals. You need relatively few of them to produce the same amount of food. So these proxy taxes for saturated fat or for food carbon, I'm a little bit on the fence about them, because they can be, they may cause a situation where overall animal suffering increases if they nudge more people towards small-bodied animals. On the other side of the coin, though, while animal product taxes are very politically unpopular, alternative protein subsidies are far more popular. So, making the food cheaper rather than making the food more expensive, that's well supported and perhaps not surprising. But overall, there's a strong case for leveling the playing field, right? There should at least be level, if not favorable, tax rates for plant-based products compared to animal products. It's ridiculous. In many European markets, it is the case that the tax on plant-based products is at a higher rate than on animal products, as is the case in Germany, and is similar in other places in Europe. So the next policy lever I'll talk about is regulating animal production, and this is, you'll recall, the most well-supported measure, which is improving on-farm animal welfare standards, right? Increasing things like stocking density, minimum stocking density, having other sort of standards that you must meet if you're in the business of farming animals. This is survey data from the UK on the acceptability of various different farming practices. You can see in blue the percentage who find these practices to be acceptable, in red the percentage who find them to be unacceptable, in yellow the percentage who are not sure. And the main point here is just to, again, absorb between 75 and 95% of people find all of these common animal farming practices to be unacceptable in the UK. So there's strong support for increased animal protections. And when you get into the details of what actually happens to animals on farms, cutting tails off newborn pigs, keeping pigs in cages where they can't turn around for weeks on end, cutting off the beaks off newborn chicks, killing newborn male calves, and so on, the overwhelming majority of people say these practices are not acceptable. So increasing animal welfare standards is well supported, therefore. Now, just to look at what we're doing with animal welfare standards when we do this in terms of the quantity of those animal products being supplied. This is a supply and demand curve whereby you can think of this as very high prices, there's very low quantity demanded. And then as the price comes down, there's very high quantity demanded, right? Everyone thinks it's very cheap. No one thinks it's very expensive. And then you have the opposite going on with supply, right? So when the price is very high, everyone wants to sell and make and supply the things. There's a high price, you can get a lot of money for it. And when the price is very low, nobody wants to supply the things, you can't get a lot of money for it, right? So opposite directions for supply and demand, they meet at this point called the equilibrium. And where these curves meet, that determines what the price is going to be and what is going to be the quantity of that thing produced. So if we're looking at this from a meat reduction perspective, what we are looking for is this quantity here to go down. So we want to create conditions that are going to cause a lower quantity of meat to be produced and consumed. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. So the first, where we are trying to impact consumer decisions, and we can think about that first section on consumer research with all the different framings and language that you should use and so on. We're trying to move down this curve. So we're trying to say we want there to be a lower level of demand at any given price. So at this price, formerly there was this much demand, now there's going to be this much demand. Formerly there was this much, now there's going to be this much, right? So we're moving down the demand curve. And when we do that successfully, we run a successful Go Vegan campaign or whatever it may be, we arrive at a new equilibrium. So we actually get a lower price in this case, but we also get a lower quantity produced. So we've moved down that demand curve, we get a lower equilibrium now, and we've reduced the quantity being produced. So that's what we want. Another way of achieving this reduction in quantity is moving up the supply curve. And this is what we're doing when we regulate animal production. We're saying for any given quantity of animals farmed, the price of doing that is now going to be higher. There's going to be more stringent standards to be met, and therefore it's pushing up the supply curve, right? And again, you can see when that happens, we get a change in the point where the two curves intersect, and we get actually this time an increase in the price and a decrease in the quantity consumed, because that supply curve's been shifted upwards. So I mainly include this for animal people who are inclined to oppose welfare improvements. If you're not an animal person, that might seem a strange thing to exist. If you are an animal person, you'll either be one of them or rolling your eyes along with me. But yes, certain animal people don't like the idea of animal welfare standards because they feel it's some form of appeasement or something like that, right? Or you know, saying it's acceptable if the cage is only big enough. The point here is to say there is actually going to be a reduction in the quantity of animals being farmed as well. And that's something that I think is often missed in this kind of intervention. So next we'll talk about labelling as part of policy, and this is a animal welfare labelling scheme proposed by the UK government. We're kind of overdue some news on how likely this is to be adopted, but this would be a big improvement on where we are currently. We can see this is the top level, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Very clear ordinal system that is proposed to be applied to poultry and pork products. We already have some mandatory welfare labelling for eggs. And importantly, this is going to replace, or I guess at first exist alongside, this kind of hodgepodge range of different certifications which mean slightly different things but all look quite similar in their color and shape and design. There's a similar thing that I could show you in the US. I think that you guys have even more different Humane America and Humane Standard and all these different things which are quite similar but mean different things. Is designed to be confusing. it really is designed to be confusing, right? As many with many more of these things existing, some of these are made by the livestock industries. With many more of these things existing, it makes it hard to keep track of. Even people who are extremely motivated can't tell you the difference between the different humane labels available, right? Which is, of course, exactly the point. And so it's incredibly important to have a clear ordinal system that applies to all animal products. The other thing with these opt-in standards, they're privately paid certification schemes, first of all, right? So if you are paying the certifying body, they don't really have an incentive to come and inspect your farm and rescind your certification if you're not meeting the standards, because you'll stop paying them. So there's kind of a perverse economic incentive there. And there's also this situation where there are only welfare labels on products which meet some welfare standard and want to demonstrate that and show that off. But there are not any welfare labels on the lowest welfare products. They just don't disclose any welfare information, right? If there's no news on that, it's probably bad news. And you can imagine a world where it's optional to disclose the health information of different products. And you can think about, the cake aisle in your supermarket, and all of the cake manufacturers say, well, this is great. It's now optional to disclose our nutritional profiles. And since our cakes are not particularly healthy, we're going to take the option to not disclose that. Right, so you're going to walk down the cake aisle. Now, some cake manufacturers, maybe the raisin loaves or whatever, will be relatively healthy and have some good labels. Maybe they can put a healthy label on there. All of the other cakes which are unhealthy are not going to have a label, and you're going to be in this situation where you're going to walk down the cake aisle, you're going to only see green traffic lights or whatever the equivalent system is, and you're going to come out and think, cakes are pretty healthy. Right, so these are all kind of problems with this like hodgepodge of private certifications that we have in the UK and in the US currently. And this is all a good case for moving towards mandatory welfare labels, which are ordinal, which are clear, and which have to apply whether or not it's good news, right? The thing about this system, they're going to have a lot of products with a red number 5 label on them who really don't want it, right? And the animal industries are pushing back hard against this. Similarly, and with a little more traction, it seems, although not more support in our survey, notably, we had actually higher support for animal welfare labels compared to carbon labels, which you can see here was just about 49%. But some of these eco labels on food are a little further along in terms of their development. Another last point on labeling is to do with animal product alternatives, and this is sort of a perennial fight that the plant-based industry is in about whether or not they can use certain terms in their packaging. So this is cocoa dairy free, but it's not a milk alternative or says milk anywhere on this packaging. This product was called This Is Not Milk. And I believe has had to, you don't see this in the supermarkets anymore. I think they had to change that because the dairy industry was concerned that people might think this is milk. And of course we have This Isn't Chicken, which again we are just waiting for the industry, the poultry industry, to say this is misleading, that this is chicken. So that's another thing where regulators can have exercise a bit of common sense on these labels for plant-based products. Interestingly, different jurisdictions appear to lean different directions with respect to how sensible they in fact are on these things. And last point I'll say on policy levers, which is sort of something that can be implemented in public catering or incentivized in private catering settings, is nudges, so sort of behavioral architecture changes to move people more towards plant-based products. This is an increase in selection of vegetarian options when they're positioned first in a buffet. So when people fill up their trays with a vegetarian option already, they get to the meat option later on and they're less likely to choose it. Here we can see increased selection of a vegetarian option when vegetarian options make up the majority of a menu. So we get up to 50% selection when veg options are 75% of the menu. from only 25% selection when they're 25% of the menu. And the biggest, most consistent nudge that we have is defaults in settings where there is a default choice, moving from a situation where the default is meat and you have to request the vegetarian option to a situation where the default is vegetarian, you have to request the meat option, can result in these massive increases in selection of the vegetarian option. This is especially good for if you're organizing events or conferences and things like this. People have to choose their food selection in advance. Setting a default, for most people just stick with the default whether or not it's meat or vegetarian. Okay, so that's the end of the policy levers section. How are we doing for time? Not too bad. I'll pause here if there's any questions. And yeah, like I say, the last two sections I have here are a bit shorter.
I had a question about the labeling section. I think that's super interesting to me. Is there any research that backs that increased labeling or increased information affects consumer choice?
Yeah, it's a fair question. There is, honestly, some of the research I've seen on this suggests that the effect is like somewhat modest, where even when these kind of labels are added, there's not a huge effect on food choice. But I think it's important in the longer term, and things which wouldn't necessarily be captured by choice experiment studies, for this information to be known, for people to notice, oh, look at this, actually you can see that most of the food options I have available to me are like the lowest welfare standard. I think that kind of creates an environment in which people are more likely to move towards those options in the longer term, even though that might not be collected so much in the short-term experiments.
Is there like policy coming forward now about these sort of labeling regulations and things like that, or is this more of like a hypothetical ideal situation?
Yeah, in the UK, these labels on the left are actually being considered currently by the government. So this has been in consultation for a couple of years. And this top level one is the sort of picture that they've given as an example. And then I've inferred that the next four are going to be, these colors, but who knows what this picture is going to look like on the number 5, right? It's like some factory farm cartoon. But yeah, so this is being considered currently, and well, I feel like I've been saying this for a few years at this point, but hopefully we know more soon.
On this slide, when you're discussing like the new labels, I don't think, at least I don't have the context of what current UK labels look like. So could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so these labels that you can see on the right-hand side are various different privately administered things, and these are all different schemes. So these are not necessarily like ordinarily organized. Now, the details of this, I think this Soil Association Organic is in fact the highest set of standards out of these. Then RSPCA is significantly better than legal minimums, and Red Tractor is, my understanding, this is the main one that the livestock industry in the UK have basically made up, and is, I think, in most animal products actually no different from the legal minimum. It just restates the legal minimum, like stocking density and other standards that they have, and consumers naively think, well, these all look roughly the same, and so if I see the Red Tractor, that's good enough for me. And it is this kind of situation where most consumers are wanting to believe that there's good news, so it's really rife for this kind of misleading, sort of misleading marketing. But from the producer's perspective as well, let's say that one of these labels, I'm really going to have to do something different. I'm going to have to refit my barns, and I'm going to have more space per chicken, and it's going to cost more, and so on. And one of them, I'm not really going to have to change anything, and I get almost the same effect from consumers just assuming it's fine. But there's no wonder that most people go towards the one where they don't really have to do anything, right?
like you've been saying that the government has been considering the more universal or mandatory labels for a couple years. Is there like some sort of pushback or like, I don't know, really big pushback for why they wouldn't be considered or why they didn't just start out with like one universal label in the first place?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's plenty of lobbying against it from the animal industries because they realize that, hey, if we have to start putting red number fives on our factory farmed products, people are going to realize that's like most of our products. So they go to the same meetings that I go to and, you know, sit on the other side of the room and lobby for the opposite things that I lobby for, basically. They do have, you know, cynical livestock industry organizations to have people turn up and say, well, why don't we make this optional and try and water it down and stuff like this. And I mean, it's on one level it's quite shocking that that goes on, but on another level it's entirely predicted and predictable, because of course, right, this is an industry just trying to defend itself and ensure that its costs don't go up, and of course they're going to send people to the meetings and try and undermine the animal welfare standards if it's going to mean they make less money. So there really is like some cynical lobbying against this kind of thing that goes on. And then as to why this isn't like the default or why it doesn't start that way, I guess that it is like an evolution of public interest, or like maybe more demonstration that there's public interest. It didn't start this way just because we haven't always done factory farming, right? Factory farming is less than 100 years old. So 100 years ago, there wouldn't have even been that pressing a need to have something like this because, well, they were all just sort of backyard animals, right? Whereas now there is such a difference between, you know, the number 5 factory farms and the number 1 sort of backyard free range, whatever it may be, that there is more of a range to exist in. And then the other part of that, I think that these certification schemes, the privately administered ones, although there's lots of problems with them, I do think they're better than nothing that these kind of things exist. And one of the reasons for that is because they establish some sort of levels of well, what might be a reasonable stocking at density, right? There's the RSPCA, for example, have already been having these conversations for several years when setting their standards, and so then when it comes time to saying, okay, we're now going to make it mandatory and we're now going to have the government mandated labels, there's already some numbers that different organizations have used, and there's already been some thinking about, okay, exactly how is this going to be implemented and measured and so on. So yeah, I think that it's moving more towards mandatory labels. There's a couple of other countries which are going in this direction as well. I think Germany again have already or are doing something along these lines. But yeah, the mandatory standards are really a world of different from the privately administered opt-in, similar but different looking certification schemes that we have currently.
I had a question about the last slide where you mentioned like defaulting to the vegetarian option. So like I feel like there is definitely some like potential for like criticism in the sense that some people would like maybe feel scammed, you know, if they got a vegetarian default when they expected to and stuff. There's gonna be some negative feedback. And I was wondering if there was like a range of years you think where like the positive outcome would like, you know, overdo the negative outcome, and like obviously long term would be better, but in the short term it could be like bad, right? So what's like the time range that we're thinking of?
Yeah, I see what you mean. There is certainly default's kind of an interesting one because there's so many situations where there isn't really a default, right? You're just kind of choosing from this list of options. There's a lot of situations where there isn't really a default. And in the experiments on the defaults, they really vary in their kind of setup. There's one where you sit down and you're given a vegetarian option and you're told, you know, if you want a meat option, you can go and look at the meat menu that's on the wall over there, right? So there's a whole other element of have to get up and, you know, it's in front of other people and so on. So there's kind of different ways that this could be implemented. There was, for a while, Burger King in Austria would ask customers did they want normal or with meat, and that, you know, that was one way of presenting a default option when people would order whatever burger they're having. They would have the vegetarian option or the meat option. They do a normal or with meat. So in most cases, the consumer is going to be aware of the fact that they're getting a vegetarian thing by default. And the nice thing about defaults is, as with nudges, one of the key features of nudges is meant to be that you're not forcing the choice, right? You're not saying, okay, the menu is just 100% vegetarian. You have to have vegetarian, like it or not. So you can get, for people who are really going to grumble about it, this 13%, they can still go and swerve from the default and get their meat. But for most people, just that setting of the default, maybe there's an element of the social expectation that comes with that, is enough to just make them stick with it, basically.
Sweet. I think that's all the questions for this section, so we'll hand it back over to you.
Awesome. Okay, guys, I'll whip through the last couple of sections. I do have a hard stop at 9, unfortunately, so I'll get through these quickly. Or, well, at the hour, I should say. It's not 9 for you guys. Okay, so intellectual property. This is an interesting one because here we have an industry in alternative proteins where some of the leaders of the companies, here's Uma Valetti from Upside Foods and Josh Tetrick from Eat Just, as well as the big investors, including Jeremy Collar and Jim Mellon. These are two British guys who are big investors in alternative proteins. And what these four have in common is that they are all vegetarians or vegans, and they're mission-driven people. And you'll find this as a common feature across a lot of alternative protein companies in both the leadership and the actual owners and the investors are mission-driven vegetarians and vegans. So nonetheless, we have the concept of a patent, which is, protection of intellectual property within a certain company. When they invent something new, they're going to get normally a 20-year monopoly for producing it. And this is a good system insofar as it incentivizes research and innovation, right? It's worthwhile to put money into coming up with new stuff if we know that if we're successful, we're going to have a 20-year monopoly, we're going to be able to make money off it. But on the downside, in the immediate sense, it kind of restricts progress to be slower than it could be if everyone could just use each other's inventions, right? You're in this situation now where you're restricting competition, granting one company a 20-year monopoly on the technology. And so, although it's kind of needed in the first place to make the innovation happen, it's not great that it slows down the diffusion of the innovation to other companies by granting that research, by granting that monopoly. And it might be also restricting further research and further iterations on your fantastic invention and concept because your competitors can't use it in their testing. On the plus side, though, patents are basically a tool for giving companies, or one of the things that they are, a tool for giving companies access to investment capital, right? If you have a unique patent, you're going to be able to then access capital to make it happen, which you might not be able to ever make it happen if you don't have a patent for your idea. And it also then makes the technology public after the 20-year period elapses, which is unlike trade secrets. Trade secrets are not patents, and are just things which not very many people know. The secret ingredient in Coca-Cola, right, is not patented. Is just not known by very many people. And I'm sure there's all sorts of NDAs and stuff like that around it as well, right? But there's no mechanism for saying, okay, 20 years after Coca-Cola come up with it, it's now public. No, it's just, you don't know what it is, tough tits, right? So that's one advantage of the patent system. There's a couple of examples where companies have come up with really beneficial technologies and then just made them open to the public. Volvo invented the 3-point seatbelt. They could have had a 20-year monopoly on cars with seatbelts, and they decided not to. They decided to make it open. And any manufacturer were allowed to use them. They diffused very quickly, and now all cars have 3-point seatbelts. Likewise, Tesla, with their electric vehicle patents, making them open, making them accessible to all car manufacturers. And notably in this latter case, right, there's definitely some infrastructural advantages to faster diffusion of electric vehicles, right? And a lot of Tesla's value comes from their battery networks and stuff like that, their charging networks. and is sort of codependent on enough people having electric cars. So there could be some commercial incentives for actually opening up patents like that as well. So we looked in this paper that we have coming out on this shortly at 4 forms of intellectual property sharing. One is altruistic patent sharing, where companies just straight up say, here's our patent, we could enforce this, but we're not going to, and now it's open and anyone can use it. A second one, which is a promising avenue, I think, for alternative proteins, is sharing what did not work, sharing kind of close failures. If you're a cultivated meat company and you have something which didn't quite come off, and maybe you've spent a lot of time and resources in experimenting with, clearly it's a great value for the rest of the cultivated meat industry if you share that, so that others don't have to waste their time and resources on the same thing. A third is patent salvaging. So this is where you have companies going under and other companies acquiring their intellectual property. There was a period where the alternative proteins investment market was really booming, and a lot of companies were able to acquire capital. And now some of those companies have fallen by the way, and some of them nonetheless have valuable intellectual property that others might want to come in and take advantage of and acquire, meaning that those investors can still get some return on that as well. And the fourth and sort of most interesting that we came across in this section was benevolent patent extensions. There's a phrase to Google if you are into this sort of area. Basically, the idea here is that companies with socially beneficial patents will be incentivized to make them open in exchange for extensions to other unrelated patents. So if you have a patent on, for example, cultivated meat, and we say, hey, that's really socially beneficial, it'd be great if you could open that up. In exchange, we're going to give you some extension to your patent on, you know, iPhone chargers or whatever, like commercial but non benefiting the world inventions you might have. And essentially then that allows you to get value from something that's not going to be socially beneficial by sharing something that is going to be socially beneficial. So that's benevolent patent extensions. Give that a Google if that is interesting to you. It's a very new concept that requires a whole legal framework and everything, but it's going off. So last point, last section here, and I don't have enough time to do this justice really, but it's only a short one. There's this idea that meat production is supporting agricultural jobs, and that if we reduce meat production, that will reduce agricultural jobs. But that's actually not what has been observed. This is between 2000 and 2019. We saw a 15% decrease in the number of people employed in agriculture worldwide, even though we saw a 46% increase in total meat production. So we were producing more meat than ever, and we had fewer people than ever employed in agriculture. Here's survey data from France and Germany, where we saw a higher percentage of those working in the meat industry identifying as meat avoiders compared to people who did not work in the meat industry. I'm really racing through now in the last 3 minutes, but I'll share these slides so you can see this in more detail. Farming jobs are often an important part of family tradition and identity, are often occupied by people with lower than average education and limited proximity to other employment. And often people have not only their job, but actually substantial investments in animal farming equipment, animal farms, and so on. And so for these various reasons, it can be quite challenging for farmers themselves to move out of this into alternative fields. One thing, or there's a couple of things here, 3 things that we can agree on, right? Us meat reduction folks and meat producing folks, is restricting imports of low welfare animal products. We have in the UK a situation where there is relatively high welfare standards for producing animals, but you can get cheap animal products imported from places with no welfare standards. And that's not fair on the animals, it's not fair on consumers, and it's not fair on farmers in Britain who do have to meet those higher welfare standards. Implementing mandatory standardized animal welfare labeling, as we discussed, would be obviously good for animals, and it would also be good for farmers, because again, the majority of these farming jobs, which have been wiped out by factory farms, would have been somewhat protected if there's some way for high welfare farmers to essentially capture the added value from those higher welfare products via standardized labeling. But they can't do that if factory farm products can just obfuscate and appear to be high welfare. and preparing farmers for the alternative protein value chain. So this is things like producing cultivated meat media ingredients and or ingredients for making plant-based meat, and there's all sorts of opportunities that can be available for farmers there. Finishing almost exactly on the hour. This is links to my slides. You can find all of this at tinyurl.com/socscialtproteins, as in social science alternative proteins. tinyurl.com/socscialtproteins if you want to find these graphs and references and so on. And thank you guys so much for inviting me to speak. And I'm afraid I don't have time for final questions, but you can email me at chris@bryantresearch.co.uk. Thank you again so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Dr. Bryant. We really enjoyed your presentation.
Yeah, we'll look you up on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll watch the videos.
Please do. Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'll see you there. Thanks so much, guys. All right. Nice. That was good, guys. That was good. Let's get ready for Ask Yourself. Nice. Hopefully he's remembered me. What's going on, guys? Hey, there's a bunch of people here. Thanks for joining. Make sure you drop a like on the stream. Hey, Vegan STEM. Hey, Tone. Nice to see you guys. How are you doing tonight? Hey, Lambretta. What's going on? Yeah, we got Ask Yourself. I was planning to watch this with him to get his take on it. Yeah, that's right. That's my professional hat on over there. That was quite cool that they let me stream that. I should definitely ask for those kind of things in the future. Let me message AY quick. I normally message him a bit in advance, which I didn't do this time. Hey, Oppenheimer, how's it going? Yes, they did. Yeah, I actually spoke to that class a couple of years ago. I think I could probably tell I used the same slide deck. Some of them are a little bit outdated. All my slides are made during my 2020, 2021 peak slide making era. And have gradually aged since. Well, I'm going to be in trouble if AY's forgotten me. You're going to see this. You're going to see the stream empty out, I bet. We got some good stuff that we could watch otherwise. Let me take the opportunity to go to the bathroom. You might hear AY click on and start speaking to an empty room. Right, give me 5. Damn, still no luck. Yeah, I'm not sure if we're getting AY tonight, guys. Let me, how am I going to change my stream title in here? Guess I have to on YouTube. Just when I open up my YouTube, I just seen that Alfie uploaded a 2.5 hour review debate of Destiny versus someone called Cold Poison on veganism. Maybe maybe this is what AY's been doing today. Right, let's see if we can change this. Fake news, guys. I think we've been jilted by AY. Well, not to worry, the show must go on. Lucky we've got a lot of good stuff to do already. Let me jump out of here. Actually, you know, I'll stay in there. Maybe I'll shut up, who knows. But in the meantime, we've got plenty to be kicking on with. Let's take a look at, well, we can finish watching this Paul Bashir talk. I think we'll finish this and then we'll maybe take a look at some Substacks and we'll do a little bit more Fast Action Network. We'll see if we get AY.
On people who will act, who will change. And that's that. That's how this ball game goes. I want to now get into the flowchart that we have because a lot of people ask me exactly how to do this and to not get too angry. Because if you're not angry, you're not paying attention, right? So of course we should feel angry. But the way that you channel your anger into activism is exactly how you feel fulfilled at the end of the day. So the more effective your activism is, the more fulfilled you will feel. And that's the only way to transmute that anger. Otherwise, you will just sit with that anger and it will rot you alive inside. So that's another reason why you need to be active for the animals. So what I'm teaching you right now is not a script, okay? What I'm going to get into behind me is not a script. Everything that I'm covering here is based on principles. And as long as you understand that, it's not so much about saying things exactly as I'm telling you to say them here. It's about understanding why you're saying them and saying them however you want to say them, but saying the same thing in order to provoke a certain response out of people. Okay, so obviously this is based on being at a cube of truth, and you can apply this into your interactions in general. So if at the beginning, if I'm talking about seeing the footage and I'm making points about pointing at the footage and things like that, just imagine that you don't need to actually have the footage in front of you, although it is helpful. You can actually apply these principles in social interactions. In fact, I just went to Taiwan and did an action called 15 Days in Taipei, which was 15 days consecutively of doing cubes of truth in Taipei. And then during that action, I did my first lecture in front of a classroom. And I've been looking forward to doing that kind of activism, but I wanted to test to see if it would work for me to simply follow these principles in a classroom lecture. And I convinced 23 out of 33 students to declare that they would be vegan as of that day and also speak out against this injustice.
That's pretty nuts. Yeah, I thought the same, Stem. I'm not sure why he made a big thing of saying it's not a script. It seems fine if it is a script. Or it's like a flow chart or a discourse tree or something like that. But okay, they seem quite keen to say that it's not a script. I think it's fine if it is.
Okay, so somebody stops at a cube of truth. We don't chase after anybody because we only want people that are open-minded and willing to change. So somebody stops at a cube of truth and we say, have you seen this kind of footage? Okay, this is a good test question to see what their openness is exactly to this. And if people are confused about what's going on, we can explain it to them by saying we're showing behind the scenes of industries that exploit animals. And namely, we're showing the meat, dairy, and egg industries. The important question to ask from the beginning is, how do you feel about animal exploitation? And the reason why we start with feeling is because most people's brains are conditioned by the society that we live in, right? And that's why it's awesome to outreach kids, by the way, because they're not so conditioned. But when you tell people the truth,
yeah, that's the big thing, Tone. You know, there's this Dublin Declaration debate between Freddie Leroy and Irina Hertz on Thursday morning. That'll be my next stream. It won't be the same time of day. It'll be almost the opposite time of day. In a day and 12 hours from now. But that is the big thing in any discussion about this topic on various different levels. It's just the red herrings and gish galloping and going off on a completely wrong set of ideas that's just completely irrelevant. And that has been my main advice to Irina Hertz before the Freddie Leroy debate on Thursday. Just stick to the point. If they go off on a whole rampage, just ignore it and come back to the point and point out that they haven't answered your question. It's just very predictable. I don't even want to say tactic, because I don't know. Sometimes it's deliberate. Sometimes people, it's just a sort of a natural reaction to encountering something that you know you don't have a good answer to. It's just like, well, I'm going to spew out everything that I know about this topic and related topics and hope that eventually I stumble onto something that sounds good. But it's not thought through, and it's frustrating to listen to because you can tell it's not really going anywhere. It's, yeah.
they recognize the truth. The truth is familiar.
Yeah, phone batteries, though, true.
Have you ever heard the expression real recognize real? Yeah? This is an urban saying, and there's a lot of truth in that. Because when you tell people the truth, they recognize and respect exactly what it is, the truth. And that's why when you are telling people the truth, it is not going to invoke the kind of response that a lot of people think. A lot of people think that being as confronting as I'm telling you to be is going to invoke people who want to be violent with you and fight you and things like that. And while that may happen rarely, it is not the common response that you get from people, because again, they respect the fact that you are telling them the truth. Telling people what they need to hear versus what they want to hear is the biggest form of love that you can show someone and respect. And that's another thing, and people confuse being loving in your approach with just saying what they want to hear and pandering and things like that. But if you tell them what they need to hear, you will actually invoke the response that you're looking for, which is to earn respect And earn is a key word there, because you actually have to do something in order to get respect from somebody. And that means you're willing to do the thing that's difficult. If someone is open-minded, they will, based on their response, they will show you by saying something like, yes, I've seen this kind of thing and it's, yeah, it's terrible. Or they'll say, no, I've never seen this kind of thing before. And if they're a troll or they're closed-minded, they'll say something like, yeah, I've seen this kind of stuff before, whatever. Or, yeah, this makes me hungry, yum. Now, in the case of a troll, you can just say the same question, really, is this how you feel about animal exploitation? Are you sure? And if they continue on with their charade, this is a good sign for you to not waste time with that person. Thank you for not wasting any more of my time. Move on.
Yeah, that seems like pretty good advice. I mean, even in the case where, you know, some of those people could be poked into a real discussion eventually, it will just not be worth it to find that small proportion of the trolls who can be engaged with for all of the frustration of engaging with the others who can't be, right? And it is a numbers game. There's essentially infinite people who you would have the opportunity to talk to if you weren't wasting your time with somebody who's not going to make any change anyway. So yeah, makes sense to be pretty ruthless with moving on if you realize that one's not going anywhere.
And if they are someone who just doesn't care, same thing, move on. We can't change people who don't care. And if they are open-minded, then you can ask them, are you against animal exploitation? And most people, by far, will say yes. Because how crazy would it be to say, no, I'm actually for it? Even hunters will tell you that they're against animal abuse. Isn't that crazy? So most people will actually not only just say that they are against animal exploitation, they will say, of course I'm against it. 100%. How crazy of you to even ask that question. That's usually the response that you will get when you ask that question to them. The next question is where we get into the core of the intention of the interaction, which is to hold them accountable and to tell them the truth. Do you think it's possible to be truly against animal exploitation if you consume animal products such as meat, dairy, and eggs? If you are demanding this while pointing at the screens? Now, this is where people will either get into their excuses and they'll say, well, I do think it's possible because there's a better way to do this. We can do this humanely. Or, yeah, I think it is possible as long as you have like a chicken in your backyard and blah, blah, blah. The humane myth, right? Or, no, it's not possible because there's a contradiction there. If you consume animal products, you're not really against it. Now, if they say the latter, that means you're talking to someone who's honest and open-minded and usually more willing to change than people who give excuses. But it's not to say that if they give excuses that they won't change, because sometimes people give excuses from a genuine place. They're just throwing things at you to see if it sticks. Not in a way to be shitty with you. They just want to test the waters to see what's true and what's not.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's exactly it, testing the waters. People in that situation are not like asserting some contrary set of facts that they are going to defend and think is true. They're literally just kind of, they haven't thought about it before, and they're literally just kind of, yeah, exactly as it says, like throwing a lot of the wall to what sticks. That is a very sales attitude. He says he has a sales background. That's a very sales attitude. I remember being taught the phrase bullshit excuses. I don't really remember if that was supposed to describe a specific type of excuse. or if it was more just an attitude. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Now, the next question is, do you feel that anything is preventing you from being vegan? And an alternative to that question is, well, why aren't you vegan now? And this is where you'll get any of the residual excuses, any of the leftover excuses that there could possibly be in that person's mind should come out then. And it's important that you get all of the excuses out of them so that you can address them. And there's nothing left unturned, right? So usually people say things like lions do it too. Plants have feelings also. But we've been doing this for thousands of years. My religion says it's okay. Whatever the argument against being vegan is, it doesn't actually matter how perfect your response is, even though it is good to know how to respond to these things. The best way to respond to any argument is to simply say, if you were in the animal's position and you were the one being exploited to death, would the argument that you just used to justify it be acceptable? And usually if they're open-minded...
And that's a little bit like name the trait. It's like extreme name the trait between animal and human, or name the trait between the animal and you. If you were the one, and I remember him saying that this is quite an important part of their process, putting the interlocutor, I want to say, the person that you're speaking to, in the position of the animal and saying, if this was you, imagine that. And I think, yeah, ultimately it comes down to increasing the ability to empathize, and it does seem like most excuses that you could give are going to be pretty impotent in response to that. Vegan Jordan Belfort. True.
They will understand how ridiculous it is to say what they've just said. So in the case of saying, well, religion says it's okay, you know, like we use methods such as halal or kosher. Well, what if I was to practice that method on you right now? Would you find that acceptable? The whole point of understanding how wrong it is to put the person that you're speaking with in the victim's position. And if you're not doing that, why would you expect them to understand how serious the injustice is? When it comes to any other injustice, we always analyze it from the victim's position, don't we? We don't understand how bad it is from the victimizer's point of view in any case. So why would we do it here? Why would we play the intellectual game so much of saying, well, would you do this to a dog? And that's the other thing, by the way. There's a lot of dog comparisons going on in the vegan movement too. And I understand the purpose of this. The purpose is to get people to respect cows and chickens and pigs and turkeys and fish just as much as they respect dogs. But why do we think we live in a society of dog lovers exactly? We still have shelters that operate and they kill dogs by the thousand. We still have dog breeders in our society and they breed dogs by the thousand. And dogs are not given the actual respect that you would hope. In some countries, people eat dogs, and I know that you're using this activism in countries where that's not the case. But if we want dogs, if we want cows and pigs and chickens and fish and turkeys to be respected on the same level as dogs, we're not actually achieving animal liberation. The only way that people are going to understand exactly what needs to happen is if they imagine themselves in the victim's position. And of course, people can only understand how serious it is from that perspective, because the whole concept of individuality comes from your own individuality.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I have used the dog analogy or like comparison a lot and find it to be useful. I guess it's different levels. And the interesting thing about that is when you're saying, imagine a dog in this situation, you're kind of still saying, imagine if you were a dog in this situation. You're still saying, imagine the experience, the subjective experience of this situation. In some cases, that's what you're saying, or at least that might be a little bit more, a little bit easier for people to empathize. I asked Paul Wood about his dog, right? That seemed to be like getting through a little bit there, and I do feel that he's maybe in the category of someone for whom saying imagine yourself in this situation is just too far-fetched to possibly imagine, but he could talk about the dog. So yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with his point though. There's not, on a societal level, we're not as kind towards dogs as we are on an individual level. Dog breeders, shelters, and so on, right? They are still kind of like bred and produced for people to use them as pets. So yeah, we certainly don't want to cap our ambitions at treating all animals like dogs, or like treat dogs currently, I guess.
Right? You can only understand what an individual is and how much a victim must suffer because you imagine it from your own perspective as an individual yourself. So that's why it's extremely important to not only put the person you're speaking with in the victim's position, but to also speak as if you are in the victim's position. How would you like to be represented? Another thing at AV that we have stopped doing since 2018 is conflating the vegan message with environmental talking points and health talking points. Now, the reason why we did that is because human health is another way of saying human rights. It is your right to pursue well-being. And by the way, I am a big fan of that right. I love the fact that I get to control my health with the choices I make and to be a healthy human being. But being healthy has nothing to do with animal rights. This is about the animals, not about you. And when it comes to environmental talking points, a lot of people love to tell me that the animals live in the environment. Yeah, but humans also live in the environment. And most people that are doing vegan activism that talk about the environmental talking points are not talking about wild animals that are suffering in the environment, such as gorillas and giraffes and elephants. They're talking about soil and trees and air and water. So if you are going to talk about environmental talking points as an animal rights activist, then please focus on the wild animals that are being impacted by the exploitation of non-human animals at the hands of humans, because that is what makes sense as an animal rights activist, and that is a clear message that you are getting across to non-vegans about what this is all about. Most people, when you ask them what is preventing them from being vegan, usually the response is actually pretty pathetic. They'll say things like, it's really hard to be vegan, it's inconvenient, it costs too much to be vegan. And again, if you put them in the victim's position and say, well, if someone had to pay an extra $1, an extra £1 in order to not exploit you to death, wouldn't you want that to be the case? And by the way, vegan food is not actually more expensive. It depends on what you choose. If you're at a grocery store and you choose to eat blueberries over bananas, of course you're going to pay more. Oh, and by the way, if you are only addressing arguments and it's going around in circles, we call that the circle of excuses, then we give them 3 chances. So if you address one argument and they're not satisfied and they just want to move on to the next argument without even acknowledging that what they've said is invalid, then you address the second argument and they're still not satisfied, and then you address the third argument and they're still not satisfied, and they just move on to the 4th and the 5th and the 6th. What makes you think you're going to get anywhere by playing the debate game?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I thought that rule of 3 was for at the first stage with the trolls. But he's actually saying it's at this stage with the excuses. I feel like somebody could have, it's not impossible that somebody has 4 reasons that they feel are legitimate for not being vegan. But I guess you do want some acknowledgement when addressing each one, if that it has in fact been addressed, right? And maybe some indication at the start that, like, okay, I have like 5 different things I want to say, so you're gonna have to address each of these. But yeah, if you're in a situation where the person seems to be just generating new excuses, as I can well imagine happens, then okay, that's where they're saying the rule of 3 thing comes in.
After 3 excuses, we have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. You should move on. Just move on. Stop wasting your time with those people. But if you have addressed their arguments successfully, then the next question is, do you know what the #1 benefit of being vegan is? And most people have their ears perked because they love to know what the benefit is for them. And they'll say, well, I guess it's better for your health, or it's better for the environment, which, by the way, most people say. And that proves that we don't need to be educating most people on the environmental talking points or the health talking points. And the answer that some people will give you is, well, it's better for the animals, which is a great response. They're understanding the point of the interaction that you're having with them if they say that. The way that you respond to that is by explaining the following. For the animals, they won't be exploited by you anymore. You won't be the reason that this, while pointing at the screen, is happening anymore. And for you, when you say that you're against animal exploitation, you're against animal abuse, you will no longer be a hypocrite. You will be telling the truth with your actions, which is what defines you as an individual. Your character is not defined by your words. And you can ask them, do you agree with that statement? And most people by far will tell you that they fully agree with what you said. Again, because you are telling them the truth. And you are not beating around the bush with political games and sales games, which do not work. The next question is, if you were in the animal's position, how fast would you want this to end? Most people rationally will say, of course, now. And this is an important question to ask leading up to the last question, because they need to understand the moral emergency that this is. And the last question is, then what are you going to do after this conversation? Are you going to stop exploiting animals and become vegan? And most people will say, I'll try, I'll reduce, I'll think about it. Okay, now if you were the one in the animal's position here, would you accept that kind of response? Would you want me to reduce how much I exploit you? Would you want me to abuse you less? Would you want me to just think about it and maybe eventually stop enslaving you and using you as a resource?
There is something very refreshing about just the very direct and honest approach. Like, it is just, it seems so indisputable if somebody is saying this to you. And the other thing, I mean, I think that when, to the extent that somebody knows your goal is to try and get them to move towards consuming fewer animals, consuming no animals, it's conceivable that they would interpret environmental or health appeals with some amount of skepticism, given that they know what your goal is. So I think that's another argument in favor of the approach that Paul's talking about, which, yeah, for me, there is something about feeling that the person is being honest with me and just saying what they really think, and not dumbing it down, or, like, you know, they're assuming that I can handle the truth, something like that, right? It's yeah, there's something almost disarming about that.
No, of course not. But you do get a lot of people that say, yes, I need to start right now and I'm going to become vegan. because you have done something that nobody.
Yeah, it's a good question, Stem. I'd love to have, I mean, if you could have the people doing the AV interactions, just like keeping a tally of how, you know, did this person say that they would go vegan or not? Apparently successful conversions at the end of it, then you could compare groups who have this script, not script, versus a group who doesn't have it, or a group who gets this training versus a group who doesn't get the training. And see, you know, if you can observe an increase in the percentage of conversions.
In their entire lives will ever do, which is to hold them accountable. And just remember, you may be the only person they ever speak with.
Yeah, that's it, Stan.
Who understands the importance of doing that and actually does it. For the rest of their lives, they will be comforted by people around them to continue exploiting animals to death, and it's all fun and games when it's a Sunday roast. But when they speak to a real deal vegan activist who tells them the truth, for the first time in their lives probably, they'll understand how guilty they should feel. And the goal isn't to necessarily make them feel guilty, but of course people should feel guilty, because what other emotion is the correct emotion that you should feel?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tone. That's awesome. They make this available for everyone, hey? It's anonymous for thevoiceless.org/activism resources. Thanks for sharing that in chat.
When you're responsible for the largest injustice on earth. And this is why a lot of vegans who do activism shy away from saying what needs to be said, because it doesn't feel good to make people feel guilty. But if you're not doing that and you're avoiding that, then what makes you think that they're going to change?
Yeah, that's a really powerful point that a lot of people need to hear. Again, it's like, yeah, he can understand why people don't want to do this. It's just nice to be nice, and it's uncomfortable to make people feel uncomfortable. And similarly to how he's kind of detecting the excuses for people not going vegan, I imagine it's a similar process for detecting the excuses for not holding people accountable for not being vegan, right? The ultimate answer is, it's just too uncomfortable a social experience that I don't want to have. But there are a lot of probably bullshit excuses where people say all sorts of, you know, this might not be, and yeah, genuine concerns that people might have as well. This might not be effective, or you know, you might put people off and so on. But from his perspective, it's like, you know, there's they know that this is effective, or they think that they know this is effective, right? And these are just kind of excuses for not doing the thing. And you know, it's understandable again that people would give excuses for not doing it because it is socially uncomfortable, right? Now, that's not ultimately a good reason to not do the thing, but it's going to compel people to give their excuses.
And at the end, we leave them with a little quote. Remember, this is not food for thought. This is an injustice, and it's an urgent matter. And for as long as you take to go vegan, these animals will be exploited to death because of you. Once you have gone vegan, please also use your voice to speak out against this. And that's it. It's a really short and sweet flowchart that we have. You can complete this within 3 minutes with somebody. Or for those who want to ask more questions or are a bit more difficult to deal with, it might take 10 minutes or more. To summarize this, people ask, but how do you know if you're actually being successful here? And my response is simple: we don't. But in order to be honest about the work...
Yeah, I don't love that. There could be some sort of measuring and evaluation done. I think that WTF have some sort of form filling in situation. I could be wrong about that, but I think that they have some kind of system for trying to measure the different group's effectiveness, or leaderboard for how many people, who's got the most conversions or something like that. All you would need is like a part of this process to be that the volunteers tally down out of how many people they've spoken to and how many of those interactions appear to be successful, and from there you can work out success percentage, and then you can start comparing that success percentage between different groups, and you can have different groups running different scripts and different protocols and so on. So it's definitely something that could be measured and optimized. I found myself there last time we were watching Paul Bashir that I have to reach out and suggest some sort of measurement and evaluation thing. Seems like you do want some evidence, even just to be able to support your own case that this is effective, from these interactions.
That we're doing, we can only focus on what we can control. And there are only 4 things that we can control. And in order for you to stay sane and to keep your mind fresh and to have the motivation to continue doing this, the 4 things that you can control and that you should work on mastering is: what are you saying? How are you saying it? Who are you saying it to? Are you talking to people who aren't reachable, or are you talking to people who are open-minded? And how long are you saying it? Because if you say this for too long to people, you're making it seem like this is a really complex topic, and it's not. It's really simple, isn't it? So make it sound as simple as it actually is. I'm not exaggerating by saying that this is simple. You should be communicating it as simple as it actually is, so that people feel that they can adopt this immediately and they change immediately, which is the goal. Not to change tomorrow or the next day or at some point in the future, to change immediately. This is a call for action. This is not just food for thought. What are you going to do about this right now? Okay? That's as serious as it is. Do we have time for Q&A? Can we do one question? And then for the other questions, we have an anonymous for the voiceless stall. Okay, it's near the tattoo booth. And you can come and ask me questions over there, or I might hang around outside as well if you want to ask me some questions. But I'll take one question. Who's the lucky question asker? I saw this guy first. I'm going to go with you. Go ahead.
So I am a vegetarian, sorry. But I say. So my question is, because I live with a vegan, why don't you focus more on the environmental issues? I know we're focusing
It's like Paul's worst question that could have been asked.
on animal welfare, but there's a climate emergency.
Yep.
And that's right front and center. So I don't know how you do these cube sessions, but I think that's one way to get people involved.
I don't focus on it because I'm not an environmentalist. I'm not an environmental activist, more accurately. Okay? And by the way, I respect the environmentalist movement profoundly. So I'm not here to discredit the movement. I'm here to say that we are vegan.
That was a good clarification. Probably more applause than any of us anticipated for I'm not an environmentalist. I get the spirit of what he was saying, but yeah.
Vegans, and we are vegan activists. And the whole point of a vegan activist is to reject animal exploitation. Wow, thank you. And go vegan.
This guy's Rizmaxing, to be fair. This was a really good... I mean, yeah, he's a very good speaker. He always delivers this very convincingly, but that was great. That was a good Q&A.
And just quickly, before I wrap this up, I'm going to do a little video here. How about you all say, go vegan and join the cube. Ready? Go.
Wow, that's pretty base. There's a lot of people there. There's hundreds of people there. This is Vegan Camp Out 2024.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll be outside for questions, and come to the Anonymous for the Voiceless booth. People ask us how you can support AV. Come to the Anonymous for the Voiceless store, buy a t-shirt, and support a campaign we're doing in Amsterdam. One damn month, 31 days straight, 9 hours per day for the whole month of August in Dam Square, Amsterdam. I'll see you outside.
That was good. I like the cut of his jib. I'm more and more fond of Anonymous, the more stuff that we've watched from them on stream. Let's round out with a bit of Fast Action Network, guys. And after this, I'll call it. It's we're not getting AY tonight. He did message me. He said that he's moving house, so he's all a bit messed up, but that's okay. We're going to reschedule later in the week, or maybe next week, and we'll see. I'll be bringing you an AY conversation soon enough, I'm sure. But we'll do a little bit more Fast Action Network to catch up on this. We've lost our streak back down to 1 week, so we got some ground to make up here. This is Choice Hotels. Man, we've commented on so many of these comfort inn things. We're doing like 3 weeks worth of these at once. I always imagine what it must be like to be the social media people for these companies when they're getting targeted. Your job is probably just deleting these comments all day, hey? Yeah, nice. A bunch of people commenting the same stuff. I know, yeah. I'm unfortunate today, but we'll get him. We'll get him. We're already back to the 29th of September on this. Company in a Sweet Puerto Rico. Okay, couldn't find this one. So it's Choice Hotels and Radisson Hotels are the main targets for Humane League Fast Action Network currently. Let's give them a bit of a rinsing on LinkedIn. We gotta get back to completing Fast Action Network, guys. This has been too long since we've done these. It's awesome to see lots of other people are still doing them. All the comments these guys are getting at the moment are THL stuff by the looks of it. Nice. Was JHE? I was giving a talk earlier to Johns Hopkins University, a class at Johns Hopkins, on social science for all proteins. So you can rewind in the VOD if you want to see that. And you know, we did have AY in the calendar. But I think we're going to be speaking to Isaac later in the week or maybe next week. Just going to round out today with Fast Action Network stuff. We're giving these comfort ends a battering. Oh, have we completed it? I think we completed it. Let me refresh this. Ooh, there's a couple new ones must have come on since we were on here. Okay, nice. We've got a couple more things then. We'll do. Okay, they want me to add the CEO of Ahold Delhaize, which is another of these targets. And then Food Lion, we've also been doing Food Lion. The ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. So we're going to email them, let them know that we're not happy with the Food Lion. Done. So now we are back to completed status. Back down to 1 week streak, which is not ideal, but you know. Hey, thanks, Humphrey. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm not actually in the States, Eric. I'm in the UK, but I do these Zoom talks sometimes to different universities around the world. Have I got any more of those coming up that I could stream? That's the question. You know, I never thought to ask to stream them before, but then since I was streaming a couple of weeks ago, and somebody asked me to do one, I thought let's see if I can stream that. I have a couple of cool things I'm planning to stream in the next couple of weeks, actually. The next one is Thursday morning. It's going to be a day and a half from now, right? 36 hours from now, or 35 hours from now. Live Dublin Declaration debate between Irina Herson and Frederick Leroy. That's my WrestleMania, honestly. That's gonna be huge. Bare knuckle talking for I think 90 minutes. Dublin Declaration debate on Jordan on I was reading chat there, Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson's apparently been in the ICU all summer. Damn. Sucks to be him. But yeah, Thursday morning we're going to have the Dublin Declaration stream. And then I think I wouldn't be surprised there's a different crowd because it's a very different time of day. And then Tuesday, the 21st of October, is the Mass Lobby Day in Westminster. And I will do a little bit of IRL streaming from there, I think. Don't know if anybody else is signed up to this. Mass Lobby Day. Here's the link for that. You can sign up here and get your MP to come along and take action to end cages for farmed animals on the 21st of October. And let's see if I can find the thing for the Irina Herson. Here it is. This is the debate Thursday morning. What do we know about that moderator? It'll be an interesting one. So this is 9 a.m. UK time, and yeah, like I said, this is going to be my WrestleMania. Can't wait to see it. Really hope that Irina Herzog gives him a good something to be embarrassed about. My only fear there is that she'll be too polite. But that's we'll see. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this evening. Shame we didn't get Ask Yourself tonight. I will work out what's going to happen with that, and I'll do another stream later in the week or next week with him. We'll be streaming Thursday morning for this, and we'll be streaming in a couple of weeks for this. So there's lots of good stuff going on the channel, and as always, appreciate you being a part of it. We will catch up, well, Thursday morning, for those of you who I see. Everyone else, thanks for watching. Take care.